All right, guys, welcome to the Business of Art podcast. This is our interview with Greg Beecham. For many of you who probably know Greg, or if you don't, I'm going to kind of read over his bio here and give him a little introduction, and then we'll get into our conversation. After a 46-year career of painting wildlife art, Greg Beecham is no less passionate to learn and grow as an artist than he was that first full-time day in the late summer of 1978. He struggled for many years to define his vision and improve his technical skills, forced to slow down and ponder life and work as he lay in a hospital bed for 3 days in 2013. He asked himself a simple question: who am I? In other words, what am I trying to say as an artist, and how do I go about saying it? His conclusion was that he must take the tools of his trade, color, value, texture, edges, drawing, and composition, and in his work, strive toward unity in the context of simplicity and beauty. He is also fascinated with creating the illusion of mass, weight, and volume on a two-dimensional surface. Beecham considers his life work as an artist to be a journey. There have been a few paintings that have come close to matching his vision, but he continues to press on, hoping to match vision with reality. He believes his talent, opportunity, and passion to paint are gifts from God, and that it is his responsibility to pursue excellence in art and be a blessing to those who view his work. Beecham's work is included in permanent collections of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, the Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, the National Museum of Wildlife Art in Jackson, Wyoming, the James Museum in Tampa, Florida, the Briscoe Museum in San Antonio, Texas, the Booth Museum in Cartersville, Georgia, and the Montana Historical Museum in Helena, Montana. He is a 6-time winner of the Prima West Wildlife Art Award at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, as well as the Prima West Buyer's Choice Award. In the summer of 21, he was awarded the Prima West Purchase Award, arguably the highest honor in all of Western art. Greg has also received the Artist's Choice and Collector's Choice Awards at the Night of Artists Show at the Briscoe Museum in San Antonio, as well as the Red Smith Artist's Choice Award at the Western Visions Show at the National Museum of Wildlife Art in Jackson, Wyoming. Beecham's work has been covered in numerous magazines such as Southwest Art and Art of the West. His work has graced the covers of the following magazines: Safari Magazine 3 times, Southwest Art twice, Western Art Collector twice, Bugle, Wildlife Art News, Sporting Classics, and U.S. Art. Greg has been married to his wife Lou for 46 years. They have a son and a daughter who are now both grown, whom they are very proud of. All right, Greg, you've got quite the resume here. It's an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. And so just a second, I want to take a little bit of a personal spin here. Greg Beecham has been incredibly influential in my work and to me as an artist. Back in 2013, I did a workshop with him for the first time in Jackson, and my work immediately jumped from here to here after seeing him apply the paint and hearing him talk about his process. And at that point, he became kind of a mentor to me in certain ways. It just became really, really helpful to help me get going as an artist. And anyway, it's an absolute honor to have him on the podcast. And I hope you guys will start taking notes because this is going to be good.
I hope so.
Yeah. So, all right, Greg. So I guess first off, I want to have you take a few minutes and talk about your journey. You've got 46 years of professional painting under your belt, and we'd love to hear kind of from when you started, or even before when you started, to now, and what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah, because it started quite a bit earlier than when I kicked off my career efforts. I grew up the son of an artist. My dad was an illustrator and then turned fine artist, like a lot of illustrators did in the 70s and 80s. But he was a contemporary of Bob Kuhn. He illustrated Outdoor Life magazines and Reader Digest condensed books and others like that. He would teach me. He taught me to draw when I was in 6th grade. I could draw photographically in 6th grade.
Wow.
So it's been the journey started there in terms of, okay, this is a really huge skill set to have to be a painter, but it has to go a lot farther. What is art? You can make a picture look like a photograph, but what is art? So it's been an ongoing journey since then to try to figure that out, and I'm not sure I have yet. 69 years old, and I'm not sure I have done that yet. So that was a great start. And he would do things I didn't even understand why until later, how much benefit they would be. He would take the magazines after dinner and lay them out on the table, and he would compare his paintings with Bob Kuhn's paintings in Outdoor Life. And he would describe Kuhn as a designer and how he used a 3-point block design to create these beautiful pieces. I mean, Kuhn is the man. And he'd talk about himself as an orchestrator and how he would use a Z pattern to create action and almost a violent composition. And so as I got older and started painting full time, I sort of said, I like this and I like that. And how do I combine the two of them in terms of understanding how to put a painting together? So that was school, and I didn't even know it. We'd go out deer hunting, and I never shot a deer with my dad, but we saw an awful lot of deer and spent hours like just watching a single deer all through the evening till dark. And he'd just be describing the anatomy of the animal and how that back leg, that pointy thing sticking up there was actually the heel, in terms of comparing it to our anatomy. And then he would say, look down on the back. Do you see how it's sort of a little bit bluish? That's the skylight coming down. And if you paint that and get that back will roll around and create a dimensional quality to the piece. And then you see how underneath it's a little bit yellow. Well, that's the reflected light. And so you can create dimension by those things that you're observing. Again, I just loved being with my dad, and I didn't realize until later that this was valuable education. And so that was and I drew a lot, not as much. I read about some people in their biographies, they were drawing every day, and I got involved in sports and other things. I was not a good athlete, but I was involved in it. And it wasn't until I took the time, joined the Navy after high school, not knowing what I wanted to do, and finally decided, this is what I need to be doing. And so I was able to take that time in the service to say, I'm going to go for it. And so I went to a little bit of college after the Navy and didn't learn very much. Only one class I think I got anything out of, an art history class, where I learned the difference between active and passive composition. And so I still remember, and I'm always teaching it, Apollonian passive, Dionysian active. And so after 2.5 years of college, I'd gotten married in that time. My wife graduated, and we went back to New York State where my dad was, and my parents had split up by then. So we stayed with my mom, and I painted all week and would go up once a week to my dad's studio, about an hour drive, and he would just rip me to shreds. What he would do, he was very good, but hard. He would just stand there and kind of fold his arms and look at the piece a good 5 minutes before he said a word. And every time, and he would say, you're coming along, and then he'd just say this, and this. And that one time he didn't, he just ripped me. You're cannonballed it, and it just, what he meant by that was the composition was just kind of exploded. There was stuff everywhere that I didn't form, come to any kind of focal point. Here I am, this Navy veteran going home crying.
Wow.
But I couldn't have been a better education. It was great. And so all summer long, the summer of 1970, I studied with them and out on my own. One thing, I know one of the things you want to ask me is how to do business. And I'm the worst businessman that ever lived. And I just didn't really know how to do things. And I got into a gallery, and he took my first 2 paintings and paid for them. And so then I did a third, and I sent it to him, and he sent it back and said, don't ever call me again. This is crap.
Oh, no. Wow.
So the wide awakening about, how this thing is going to go. And it was a struggle. My first 25 years, I ended up, there was times when I just figured it was over. And about that 25 years, I thought, it's done. My wife was a business manager here at the Du Bois, Wyoming School District at the time, and I thought, I need to ask her for a janitor job. The dream is over. And I just made a decision. Are we okay with going in? It's going to take a while.
No, yeah, you're good. Yep.
Right. I made a decision that I had 2 shows coming up. and I would go to those shows, and depending on what happened, I would either, get a real job or continue with the art. And one was the Southeastern Wildlife Exhibition in Charleston, South Carolina. The other was the Charlie Russell Show up in Great Falls, Montana. So I sent 9 paintings back to Charleston. Of course, that's an expensive show to do because, cross country, 9 paintings, 5 big ones, 4 small ones. And I sold a couple of the small, actually I sold all the small ones and none of the big ones. So I brought 5 paintings home, had 2 weeks till the Charlie Russell Show. And I thought I could do one more big one and sell nothing, and that's that, it's done. Or I can make a change. How am I going to change? And I got the idea of, I'm going to paint a painting a day until the Charlie Russell Show. 9 by 12s, very, simple. And what happened was I got to a place with my art that I wanted to get to and didn't know how to get there. The idea was drill the focal point, use my drawing skills and just, detail in that focal point and try to go larger and larger shapes, abstract shapes out from the focal point because I don't have time to do anything else, and see what happens. And they were the freshest, best paintings that I'd ever done. And it was like, this is how we get there. And thinking about Bob Kuhn again, people talk about loosening up. I hate that term, loosen up, because what happens so many times is a person says, I'm going to loosen up. I'm no longer going to paint hair. And they begin to dab. They become dabbers instead of thinking every single place, every single shape throughout the piece, small shape, 2 big shapes. How is it going to unify? How is it going to be beautiful? How are these shapes going to relate to each other? And that's what happened with these. I ended up doing 12 of these paintings a day before the Charlie Russell Show. And it's a function, if you want to end the super detail, of thinking abstractly, abstract shapes, small shapes to big shapes. Because the last thing you want to do is get sloppy. And what everybody thinks, oh, I'm so free now, and their work is crap because they stop drawing. And that's not what loosening up is all about. So anyway, I took the 12, sold all 12, sold none of the 5 big ones. And I thought, okay, this may be something. So I went to a gallery in Jackson. I had been there before in other galleries, and they'd always just stuck my work in a closet and nothing ever happened. And so I went to this gallery that was off the beaten path, and I asked the young guy who was running it, Greg Fulton, who later he's now the owner of Story of Fine Art, if he'd take me on. And I did a painting a day for 6 months. And that revolutionized my process, my painting ability, and it began the path toward some success. So that was huge.
Wow.
And
what year was that, Greg?
Man, I wish I could remember these things. It's early 2000s.
Okay.
And in that time period, 2 major things happened that, that gallery was one of them. Moving forward in the gallery, finding that I could have success, I could learn to paint. And at the same time, I think it was a year or so after that Charlie Russell episode that I took work. And there was a couple of old timers from a group called the Northwest Rendezvous. And they came into my room, and I just asked them, how do you get into the Rendezvous? And they kind of looked at each other, and they said, we'll be back. So they left. And they came back about a half an hour later, and they said, you're in. And
wow.
So I was invited in. I didn't know how the process worked. I was invited in as a guest artist. And as a guest artist with the Rendezvous group, you could spend 2 years as a guest artist before you were eligible for the artist. It was an artist-led group for the artist to vote you in as a member. And 2 years went by, and they did not vote me in. It's like, people talk about how hard it is. I just got rejected from this and that. I could wallpaper a wall with my rejection notices. It's not an easy road. You count the costs and say, I'm willing to do it, and you do it, but it's not an easy road. Anyway, they invited me for a 3rd year, and I went, and with this new approach to painting, I did a painting that ended up being sort of a game changer for me. It was a piece of Arctic wolves in a snow setting, so it was the first exploration I had done in terms of white on white. And can I talk about, I know you wanted for me to be able to help younger artists, so I want to talk about white on white for a second. White on white is challenging. It's fun, but it's challenging because when we think of values, I count it 1 to 10, black as 1, 10 as white. You have maybe 3 value shifts from 10 to 8, maybe 7, with which to create all of your shapes, all of your dimension, other than eyes and nose and that sort of thing. So you have to create dimension with a very narrow value shift. And so that became very exciting to me, and we can get into color theory later where you can explore various color harmonies with that. But I did this piece of Arctic wolves in snow and with that kind of mindset and took it. And I took one more piece as a guest artist there. You could have 2 paintings. And the other piece, I don't even remember what it was. It was quite forgettable. But that piece, they voted me in as a member, which was nice. But it just happened during that week, outdoor painting together, and the show that the Rendezvous did at the time. They had a group come to see what was going on and enjoy the process with the artists, and it was the Prima West Society. And that's a society that's still going on today. It's made up of collectors who love the Prima West show and get together every year and go to trips to do stuff like that, visit artists and things. Anyway, we were at the show, and this little old lady from the society from Oklahoma, Lois Joseph, walked up to me and she said, "We want you in our show." And this was my invitation to the Prima West show. I had been applying for years. My last rejection letter from Prima West was, "Dear Mr. Buchara, thank you for sending, but no thanks." They didn't know who I was. I couldn't even get my name right. And, so, one of the many rejections. And then here, all of a sudden, I'm in. And this was August. And the following June was when the show took place, but they'd had all their new artists set for that. So it was almost 2 years later. So I was sweating bullets for 2 years, a year and a half waiting. Am I going to hear it? Is this real? But it was. And so being in the Prima West show absolutely was a game changer. And that, along with working with the gallery, I just felt like it was a God thing, that I was at the end of my ropes. It was over. Dream is gone. And then he gave it back to me.
Wow.
So that was kind of neat. So then, it's just been, I've never gotten rich. I've been selling enough work to pay bills and do some other things, and I'm thankful for that. But I think, if we can move to the marketing element here for a little bit, because it's part of the journey. I am determined never to let people know where I'm going to be next. And that could be considered to some a death knell for getting rich, being huge in the marketplace, because a lot of galleries, what they really like is being safe and predictable.
Yeah.
And I never want to be safe and predictable, because if a person painting everything that's popular, everybody loves it, but it's pretty much the same painting every time. Yeah. What that means is if this artist all of a sudden has a something in an auction and it goes for $200,000, which happens, and the pieces in the gallery are now at $60,000, I can go in and buy that $60,000 piece, which looks pretty much exactly like that piece that sold for $200,000, and it's safe. I can put it on my wall because he's famous. Nobody's going to criticize me. And if I ever need to put it in an auction, I know that I can at least get my $60,000 out of it. So that safety and predictability is a popular thing in the marketplace. Yep. And I never want to be there. And so if somebody calls me and says, "I love this piece you just did that sold at such and such a place. Can you do me one like it?" And my answer is no. I've already been there artistically. It will be worse than that piece if I try to repeat myself again. Yeah. And so I've lost a lot of commissions because of that. But I hate it because I've done it a few times, and it's never as good as the first piece, and I hate doing that. Yeah. So that, has kind of hindered me, I think, plus my unwillingness to put myself out there. It's not unwillingness, it's just my personality. I'm somewhat bashful and reticent, and so, but anyway, I don't want people to know. I always want to keep exploring these young artists that just buy photos. It's like, you don't understand, especially in wildlife art. You got to be out with the animals as much as you possibly can. You've got to smell them, watch them, listen to them, study their habits, get to know their personalities. If you want to paint something that's authentic. And for me, every time I go out with the animals, they tell me something new. And plus, it's the most fun thing ever. I love going out with artist friends and watching the animals, and then at night just, talking about what we saw and looking at our pictures and how we can do this, how we can make this look wonderful. And it gets very exciting. And one of the things that Tolstoy wrote about in his essay, What is Art?, is that a work of art should say something new. And so that, in my opinion, means that every other piece that you've done to repeat what you just did is no longer art, just the first one.
Yeah.
But the key here is we're so fortunate in being wildlife painters, even though we may be the poor stepchildren of the art world, is that we get to see something new every single time we go out. We get to be told by the animals what to paint. And, you compare that to, and I don't want to dismiss anybody because there's wonderful painters in all genres, but the still life painter is limited by their imagination as to how to set up a still life.
Yeah.
The landscape painter, they can find new things, but ultimately the animal painter has it best because the animals speak, whether it's a slight shift in atmosphere or a gesture or, just the way the light hits it. They're always going to speak to you. And, you don't need to paint an elk bugling on a hillside with a couple of cows every time out. You can paint that elk, using his antler to scratch his belly. And it's just, to me, more exciting, so I just love being an animal painter. And, 46 years in, there's no less passion, as I said in that art statement, of getting out with the animals, seeing what new things. I just feel I'm so ignorant and I still have so much to learn that it's, just like you said in the beginning, it's a journey. And I'm thankful for the time I still have. I've had 2 heart attacks. The first one should have killed me. And it's been, I've got 14 years of grace that to keep it going, and not just art, but family and everything else. But as long as I have, I want to keep the passion alive.
Yeah. Thank you for that story. That's an incredible journey, Greg, and I think that's extremely valuable to our listeners. So one of the questions as you're talking here is you kind of touched on it with your approach to wildlife and getting out and gathering reference. I'm assuming you're out there with the camera quite a bit, observing the animals and documenting. As far as maintaining the passion, the drive, motivation, what do you feel besides getting out and taking images and seeing the animals, what else helps you to maintain that drive and motivation to keep going?
Well, the opportunities to explore art in ways that I haven't already. And sometimes, marketplace dictates, but occasionally I'll just veer off and do something. Like a few years ago, I think it was when I turned 65. It's like, okay, I'm going to paint something I want. I don't care if it sells or not. And we ought to be there every time, but we got to pay bills. We got to feed the habit. So I photographed a grasshopper down on one of those little mountains that sticks up straight out of the Phoenix area, out of the city. And I just thought, I'm going to have fun with this. And I painted that grasshopper, like an 1.5-inch grasshopper. I think the piece was something like, 15 by 30 inches. And
oh, wow.
Grasshopper filled it up. And it was like, we've heard the phrase, God is in the details. The intricacy of that little animal became so fascinating to me. All those crazy shapes that I'd never seen before were so fun. The armor, painting the armor on a grasshopper was incredible. So, the passion alive, just seeing the new stuff. But I also think, and you wanted to touch on color theory a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a critique here. Too often I'll go to a show and, full of wildlife artists, and they're all professional. They all know how to make a pretty picture. But almost every single room or booth I see, the artist's colors and values are identical on every single painting. And my opinion is, if I see one, then I've seen them all. I'm instantly bored after the first one. And this is where color harmony comes in. And you also have to consider value shifts, like, that white on white's a great approach. So you have maybe a high key piece and then a mid key when you're taking them for a presentation. But you can explore, like, I'm going to give a plug for Stephen Quiller's book, Color Choices, because that's where my eyes were first opened up to color theory.
Just 1 second, Greg, let me interrupt you. When you mentioned high key versus mid key.
Yeah, so let's get back to the color
difference
between value scale. 1 is black, 10 is white. So high key would be 8, 9, 10, very light in value. Mid key, a 5, grays, a mid gray, and then 1, 2, really, really dark. So that's what I'm talking about is, explore those various value shifts along with color theory. And again, the plug for Stephen Quiller's book, Color Choices, Making Color Sense Out of Color Theory. It's designed for artists. He's got his Quiller wheel, he calls it, which is brand name paints on the color wheel, which I found helpful, even though he at the time was a watercolorist. Now it's not, well, he was acrylic too. You can sort of figure out with oil how to match them up. But then he talks about the various color harmonies that are out there. My dad was not a colorist. I did not learn anything about color when I studied with him. So this was revolutionary to me. It was so much fun. And I still love, trying like different triads and complementary colors and split complementaries and analogous. And those are things that these artists really need to take some time to explore, study, and apply, because if you go to these shows, and I'm trying to school you here,
yeah,
and 90% of the work looks alike, your job then is to say, what is my next level, and how can I be someone where they want to come see my work, because it's not just the same old, same old. And you look at some of these shows and tons of people come through, but they're just kind of droning through, not seeing, because nothing's catching them. Nothing's exciting them. So if you explore color theory and color harmonies and bring 10 pieces to a show that are, not the same thing every time, but an exploration, is challenging. It's hard. It's hard when you have a palette that you're used to say, okay, I'm going to pick 2 tertiary colors and 1 primary and white, and that's going to be my entire painting. It's hard. But all of a sudden, you realize when you're getting about halfway, whoa, this is creating a mood that I never knew I could get to. So it becomes fun, and that helps keep the passion alive, is trying these new explorations, especially in color harmony. I was talking years ago about this with another artist who's very good, a guy named Scott Burdick. And he goes, well, why don't you, instead of using blue in your triad, try ivory black? And just go with 1 primary and 2 tertiaries and see what happens, because the eye will fool itself and think that the black is blue if there's no other blues in the piece.
Yeah.
And I tried it, and it was, wow, this is so cool. And years later, I did it again, where I wanted to see if 3 tertiary colors. Now, if we have the primary and secondary colors are the ones on the outside of the color wheel, they're the clean, pure colors. And as you move into the color wheel, they're called the tertiary. And I'm not an expert on this, but that's the little bit I know. And they're a little bit muddier than the primary and secondary colors. So I wanted to take 3 tertiary colors and see if I could make a dynamic piece that looked good color-wise. And so I took that ivory black instead of my blue. I took an Indian red, and I took a yellow ochre, all 3 muddier than my usual bright colors. Yeah. And did a bighorn sheep painting, and I thought, can I make this wonderful? And it was really cool. It worked out well, and there was a little bit of a light specula. The light specula on the eye sometimes has a little bit of, I don't know what you call it, a refraction, or a little bright spot on the opposite side of the eye, where you can kind of bring in some nice intense color and really get it dimensional and have fun with it. And I thought, how am I going to make that bright? And I thought, well, I'll take pure yellow ochre. Well, yellow ochre. It's not a bright color.
Right.
But in the context of the other colors being used, that one spot of pure yellow ochre just sang. And it was like, wow, how did that happen? And so these kind of explorations, just that I could tell it in your voice right there that you were excited about that.
Yeah.
And as artists,
We're all geeking out over here.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things that keep you going. I mean, there's not enough lifetimes to learn it all. And then I look at guys like Kwon Ho, and I just want to crawl into a hole because he's got such vision that I don't think I'll ever have. But I can still move forward. There's still what's my next level? And I've got to go teach a workshop here in 2 weeks, and it's one of those things where everybody wants to know how I do something, and I always have to tell them there's no formula. I'm afraid every time I start a piece, and because I don't know where I'm going. And so I can't tell you how to paint a rock. I can't tell you how to paint snow. Let's just do it and see what happens. Because as soon as you become formulaic, I think it's over as an artist. But at the same time, I go into this workshop just feeling like, I don't know anything. How am I supposed to teach them anything? And yet, obviously, I've got some years of experience, and there is something I can teach them. But that's how I go in and feeling when I do something like that. Because I just feel like I'm barely scratching the surface, and my vision is so limited. I guess I'm a little bit hard on myself, but as soon as you think you've arrived, you're done as far as I'm concerned.
No, I see a lot of value in that, and I think there's times when, I think early on in my career, when I took that workshop from you and I saw this incredible growth that was happening, and it was so exciting. Almost every painting to me felt like it was a new exploration, and I was learning and growing and having breakthroughs all the time.
Yeah.
And it's powerful stuff, and oh man, it keeps that fire burning.
Yeah, I mean, you're what, about 20 years in now, or how long have you been painting?
Well, that was in 2013 when we did that workshop, so just over 10 years.
Yeah, you were painting before that, so I mean, but it's really important though to keep that in mind though. Is what is my next level? How can I become more fresh with my stuff? What about my edges? Hard edge, soft edge, lost edge. How can I handle edges that's more exciting yet still artistic and good shapes better than I'm doing now? How can I, paint, do the Kuhn thing with these beautiful abstractions better than I'm doing now? Not like him, but in who I am, maintaining who I am.
What does that look like for me particularly? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you take what you learn at these workshops and the books and things and then apply it and make it your own.
Absolutely.
You have something in your own heart that needs to be said.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. Thanks for sharing that. So you kind of talked a little bit about your process, but let's do a kind of a broader perspective on how you approach a painting. Like from start to finish, what does that look like just in general terms?
Okay. Obviously, start is in the field with the animals and, taking pictures of the animal, but also, and when I did a workshop with Julie Chapman for a number of years up at Triple D Game Farm, and we'd always get to go out and photograph their animals, which was awesome. But I'd always remind everybody, don't just photograph the animals, photograph the foliage, photograph what's behind it, the backgrounds and things, because those are things that can help you create a unified movement or rhythm in a piece. So that's the beginning, and getting those ideas. And I use Photoshop because you taught me. Yeah, Mark, we traded. And after that first workshop he took there, traded the piece I did in the workshop for him to come and teach me Photoshop, which was cool.
It was, honestly, I felt like I got the better end of the deal for sure.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not, I'd argue with that. But so I go in and I very seldom take a photo that works perfectly as a design, as a painting. So I am instantly thinking, going through other reference, how can I bring this into a place where everything is unified, that rhythmic quality is there, the light is similar, at least in all sometimes I'll use 7 or 8 photos to create a design, and at the same time trying to keep it simple and beautiful. Just most of it for me is just a function of the cut and paste, because I don't need it to be absolutely perfect. I just need the shapes there. And so I'll design a piece, and then I'll draw it in on my canvas once I'm satisfied with the design. And I'll use a grid system, put the grid on the Photoshop and then draw a grid, so that, because we all want to sketch and we need to sketch, but oftentimes I find in my sketches that, the butt of the rabbit is off the side of the page, and so we need to be able to make sure that the painting design, and not some people, I want to be spontaneous, and that's fine. And some people would criticize the way I do it because I have this idea and I have this vision, and it'll alter somewhat as I paint, but at least I have my initial design on there, and so I'll use that grid system to draw it in. And then I will paint it in once over, and I try to stay smooth with the paint so that when I go in to do finish, little bumps and stuff aren't interrupting the real texture that I want to apply. But that way I can have a picture in whatever color harmony I'm choosing to do, whatever value shift I want to go in. And I can, spend some time looking at it, with a mirror, sometimes look at it upside down. Mirrors are great for helping you see drawing problems and seeing shape problems. And real quick, just for whoever might need to know, we don't paint an animal and a tree and a rock and a stream. We paint shapes that end up looking real, so that these shapes interlock and unify as a united abstract composition. As soon as we start thinking like, I've got this tree, I've got this animal, that just never works in terms of creating true art. So anyway, that's what I'm looking for on the initial painting, is how that's all working together. How I look and see, how can I handle edges here? What's got to be important? What should be minimized? How should I, up my values and color intensity in my focal point? And what can I do to keep everything else in subjection to my focal point? And so figuring those things out, then I go to do the painting, the finish work, and I will, I love texture. Texture is a huge part of the color value texture edges drawing composition. And so using thick paint with palette knife and brush working together, to me, is really exciting. And so at that point, my finish work, that's when that happens. And then usually try to work Alla Prima to the end of the piece. I don't work on a lot of pieces after that initial paint. If it could possibly stay soaking wet throughout the entire painting, that would be wonderful, but it doesn't. So I'll work section by section Alla Prima, and if I know that this particular passage is going to be stiff, if not dry, by the next day, I will paint in such a way that I can come back and maybe lay down the same colors again, so that will be wet, the transition colors, and work wet on wet from there so I'm working out. But, painting it's Clyde asked me one time, said painting is easy. There's only 1,000 things to remember at once.
Yeah.
And so, when you're doing that finish work and you're up in this upper left corner, the colors, everything, the values, textures, what your edges are saying, all has to be in harmony with what you're going to plan on doing down here in midsection, a couple days from now. And so though, people say, oh, painting is so relaxing. No, it's not. It's intense. It's intentional. And if you're not concentrating every moment, when you get to this other spot, you're lost because it's not going to be cohesive. So, that's the beauty of painting, the difficulty of painting, I guess you'd say. Another quote everybody knows now, I think, Edgar Degas, painting is easy when you don't know how, but very difficult when you do. That's a truism. And I've had a couple of conversations with people lately, and they find out that, no, it's not relaxing. And no, I don't feel peaceful when I'm painting. I feel intense, and I'm actually scared because I'm not real sure where I'm going until it's there. And then I get a direction, okay, it can start flowing. And usually I don't like it at all till it's almost done. And okay, I can see it now, and then it's done, and it's like, wasn't as good as I thought it would be. Yeah, so that's the way it usually works.
Yeah.
So I don't, there was only one painting one I did not long ago. Never sold, but but nevertheless, I got done with it and I stepped back and literally without even thinking, I went, wow, it never happened before. And it was just this passage of the stream bed at the bottom of the piece that it just was cohesive with the color harmonies and the rest of the piece, and it pulled it forward and just, oh my goodness. And I just kind of said, well, thank you, Lord. I don't know how that happened.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
So because most of the time it's like my vision never quite matches reality, like I said in the statement.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks for sharing that process. So let's talk about some of the tools you use. Do you have like a specific type of brand of brushes, paints? Tell us about some of that.
Because sometimes, all of a sudden the paint company stops making the number 3 flat brush.
Right.
Find another one. So I use this palette knife right now, but the problem with these palette knives is they don't last forever, and all of a sudden they break on you, and that's like, oh man, I don't have a replacement. And it's old enough that all of the writing on it is gone, it's worn off. So I was just going through and finding palette knives I could use for this workshop. And so I took about 4 of them, sort of matched it with that. And okay, this might work. and so that's that. And what I'll do, okay, I'll bring this. For detail work, like in the eyes, nostrils, and everything, where you sort of have to get that pretty accurate, although you want to keep it fresh, is I've got this Winsor Newton Scepter Gold number 10, Series 101 Sable Synthetic number 4 pointy brush, round. And so that's the one I use for the tightest of tight details.
Yeah.
And I try to get away from it as soon as I can. And even in those detail spots, sometimes I'll take, let me get my brushes out flat. This happens to be a Silver Grand Prix 10 flat. And I'll take it and maybe just take one of those edges and pop it to kill that edge a little bit. Or what I really like doing is like in an eye where it's scary because you might mess things up, is like I've done all this noodly work detail, and then I'll take a wad of paint on the end of the palette and give it a little bit of a dimensional quality and an absolute pure color, and ding, that does it,
Yeah.
So that's, and then I'll work bigger and bigger. I've got a number 2 flat, then number 3 flat, number 4 flat, and then, well, I go up to about size 8. I mean, 10 if I'm doing a huge piece and there's a large passage, but I do probably at least 50, maybe 60% palette knife anymore.
Oh, wow.
And, you watch the movies and stuff of artists and you see them and they're just, and that's how they paint. And it's like, okay, I'll do that in the paint but when you're painting, it's more like my palette knife's here and it's like, crap. Yeah, I'll fix it. And then, oh, that's good, but I need to kill that edge. Give me my wide brush. I can't start a wide brush. So I'll take a wide brush and then just go over that edge and go, kill that edge a little bit. And so that's the process of the finish work. And even though every single brush stroke is thought out and studied, and every single color is as well, it goes surprisingly fast if you stay at it. And anymore, at my old age, I'm good for maybe 5 hours a day of painting. And usually around 3:30 in the afternoon, my brain's shot. And for me to do more will be less than. And so I quit and go home, walk the dog, and go work out and whatever. With my heart disease, I got to stay in shape.
Yeah. So here's a question. You talked earlier about when you were first had that breakthrough of working into this new way of painting, and you were doing one painting a day, a 9x12. It was a smaller painting.
Yeah.
But you would knock it out in a day and get it done. How has your process shifted from then to now?
I'm just not as fast as I was, and I may even be more detailed now than I was then, and I'm caring less what other people think. Like, I want to be detailed, I'm going to be detailed, and because it's always detailed bad, loose good,
Right.
It's saying something that's expressive and is exciting both to me and whoever might be looking at it. So I probably is more taking longer, which has me scared about this workshop, which is probably going to be my last workshop. I think I'm retiring from workshops, but is because
bad for us, good for you.
I got other plans, but in terms of mentoring, but it's how the idea of doing a complete painting in a 3-day workshop is a little scary now because, I used to be able to just do it, go home. And, I've got a piece that I'm painting in right now. So it's just nothing but the finished work in the workshop. But I'm a little scared that I'm not going to get it done. I hope I do. So that's probably the biggest now. And it's just, trying to figure out ways to say things differently than I have in the past, and I can't say how because I don't know yet. Just to be more exciting and more exciting for me, so I don't get bored.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. We talked a little bit about color theory, and so if you were to sit down with an artist who's kind of just getting started and they don't understand a whole lot about color theory, kind of just getting their feet wet, what suggestions, like simple suggestions or ideas that you might give them to kind of get their feet wet with color theory? Like, what would you recommend?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why I mentioned the book, Stephen Quiller's book, is because he'll give you those color theories and tell you why and how they work. Gives you the history of color theory, invented by artists in the Middle Ages, where all they had to work with was colors in the ground. And so very few of those are bright, especially in trying to find something permanent. So they discovered that if you put what they found on the color wheel, they invented the color wheel. If you have two colors opposite each other on the color wheel and put them in juxtaposition with one another, it magnified the intensity of the color in terms of how you see it and became more exciting. So that was the origins of color theory. So what I would say is learn the process from these books where you can learn actual color harmonies, like I mentioned before, triad, complementary, split complementary, analogous, and then explore various directions to go with them. So if you first try a triad and you use cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, or maybe cadmium red deep, really pure, perfect colors, okay, try it. But then do what I was talking about earlier, try a variety of, one primary, two tertiary, this and that. So it's forcing yourself to go into this and do the explorations of the things he talks about. And I think that opens your eyes to the possibilities, because as soon as you struggle, and it is a struggle, to work with a color harmony where you don't have access to the rest of your paints. It's just those two or those three colors plus white, and you find a little bit of success going on with it. That's when it opens the doors to, oh my goodness, I didn't know I could do this. And so I would suggest that. That's how I learned and got excited about color theory.
So forcing yourself to use different colors that you're not familiar with, and maintaining those colors throughout from the beginning to the end of the painting.
And even taking colors you are familiar with on your palette and using them. But that, so when you're talking about maybe further exploration, taking colors that you're not used to and finding out what happens with this, because there's a never-ending exploration, never-ending fun in finding new things at that point.
Yeah. No, I like that. And learning from you specifically, I've tried some of that, and I don't do it enough, honestly, in my own work. And so this is a great conversation for us to have here.
Well, it's good. And again, if you take your work up to the Charlie Russell show or wherever you're showing, and you have a variety of color harmonies working, a variety of value shifts, it's just going to be more exciting, and people are going to want to stay and look around and explore what you're doing more.
Yeah. So another question here, to kind of diverge a little bit. You mentioned this will probably be your last workshop that you're going to be doing, and then you're going to be pursuing maybe some mentoring things in the future. As far as, you were a mentor to me, and that's, whether you see it as that or not, I do. You were extremely beneficial and helpful. From a mentor perspective, What are you looking for in somebody, an artist that you would consider mentoring? What would you want to see in them? What kind of qualities? I think for our listeners, it would be good to hear it from your perspective.
Well, people say anybody can do this. No, anybody can't. There is a talent. And so first of all, there's got to be some kind of talent revealed. I know my daughter, when she was in high school, said, "Dad, I want you to teach me art." And I said, "Okay." And I brought her to the studio, and I wanted to start with something that was a little bit complex, but if she didn't get it perfect, it would be okay. So we bought a rose at the grocery store, and I showed her how to do shapes and things, and I wanted her to do pencil, pen and ink, and Prismacolor. And we were going to move up from that to like a bobcat skull I have, and more and more complex things. And I went through about an hour of instructing her, and she goes, "I don't want to do that," because it sounded hard. So it's not like me as a kid. "Oh yeah, that says I want to do it that fit." But anyway, so I said, "Okay." And hands off, I went over to my easel and started painting. I painted for about 2 hours. And about 15 minutes in, I started hearing, and I knew she was working. And so I let her do it. And it came up to her after a couple of hours and looked, and she understood abstract concepts that professionals I know don't have. She had total it factor when it comes to art talent. So I went home that night and I told my wife it would be criminal not to send her to art school.
Wow.
And so she ended up getting a degree at Savannah College of Art and Design, which is a great school, and is an interior designer. Both my kids have talent, but they both saw how hard it is to make it as an artist and chose other directions. But so I say talent would be number one, that, you see vision for something exciting, a hunger to grow, and the possibility of what they're doing being successful. In other words, I'm going to spend days with a person. Is it worth my time? And I hate to say it, because if people have taken my workshops, I don't want to be insulted, but you have 15 people in a workshop and you got to give everybody equal time, and yet you have a few who are really searching and looking. You want to spend every moment with them, and then you got your professional workshop takers, and they just kind of get to say they studied with so-and-so, and I'm not interested in that anymore. I've never been in it for money. And so I'm just looking in the past couple of years. I don't want to give away too much because I don't want everybody calling me say, "Can I be one?" But right, sorry.
No.
But bring somebody like the first one I did was a young lady who, I don't even know how we got connected, but she was at a little college in Florida, and she was an art major, and she showed me some of the things she did. And so I said, "Okay, this is what we can do. And you got to bring a friend, because I don't have women alone with me in the studio." That's an agreement my wife and I have. But what we're going to do is we're going to spend a day on August 2nd. That's usually the best day I found, up in Yellowstone in the Hayden Valley for the Buffalo Rut.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to immerse her in the sights and sounds, which it just is so, it's incredible. They're going crazy. They're fighting, they're gathering their cows, they're bellowing, they're rolling. And so I took her up there. We almost got nailed. I mean, we had, I'm trying to learn not to be that bad in the park. I'd be one of those park stars. But anyway, it was a total eye-opener for her, and because she just bought pictures. And so I said, I needed you to understand why it's so important to be out with the animal.
Yeah.
And then we spent 2 days in the studio together. And then, she's every, so often she's sending me stuff. This year, like a couple of weeks ago, she sent me images of her senior show that she had at the school. And it was really fun to see her progress and her own directions from what I had shown her, and her ideas of where am I going to go now and how am I going to make a living. And just so that's the kind of thing, that I'm enjoying. I had 2 very good artists come in late November, Cole Idle and Jim Boards, both incredibly talented in different directions and both very professional.
Yeah.
We took a day and went up and watched the Bighorns in rut. And so I wanted to, that's what I want to do as a mentor, is show people how exciting the animals are. Get excited about what we're doing here. And then, they didn't paint in the studio, but they just watched me for a couple of days. And to them, that was valuable. Both of them, like I say, are accomplished, but just studying the application of paint that I do, giving them ideas, that sort of thing. So we start with a college kid and we get to some professionals, and then there's, that whole path of people in between. But just that knowledge or that passion, talent, and drive that is something that I see in them would be worth my time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's extremely valuable for people to hear. To me, it makes absolute sense that you would want somebody who is like a sponge, who's hungry for information and willing to apply. As far as receiving criticism, how would you talk about that?
Well, that's an interesting point. Julie Chapman and I taught for a number of years, like we said, up at Triple D, and we're reaching a period in time where people want to be affirmed, and I know that, and we need to do that. But, I'll just give a classic example that pretty much set us off from doing any more teaching. Is, we're trying to tell this lady what she needed to do to help herself get better. And she wasn't listening, and she was getting mad. And a lot of times people pick one person to be mad at, and the other person's okay. So Julie was the GOAT. She was mad at Julie, and I was okay. But finally, her last statement was, well, my friend Betty likes it, so I'm good. And that's pretty much, we just went after the class and just said, what are we doing here? It's getting worse and worse. People aren't listening. And so I know, and I don't want to lump everybody in the same lump there, but it just seems like the times are such that everybody wants success right now, and they want to be thought of as the best and the best of the best, and they're just not. And there's a lot of room to grow, but you can't grow if you don't listen, if you aren't like you received what I said. You were humble enough to say, okay, I'm not there yet, but I can go get there. And that's what you did. And that's the joy of teaching right there. When the person is just there to say they studied with so-and-so or not listening, or, it's like I said, I'm not in it for the money. These people I bring up, I don't charge them anything. And, with the Triple D, I always just took my gas money out of the check they gave me and donated it back to the game farm. So that's not why I do it. I do it because I feel like God gave me something. He blessed me with a lot of people who helped me, and it's a responsibility to help back, help others. So, but I want to do it with meaning now. I don't have that much time left. I know it. So I could live another 15 years. I don't know, but who knows? So while I can, I'll do that. And it's like I'm too much of a loner and too introverted to do it often. So twice a year probably would be the maximum I would do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I've always been impressed with your generosity, Greg, and I'm not trying to make you feel uncomfortable here, but you were always so kind and generous, and you always gave me a lot more time than I thought it was worth. And so thank you.
See, you're one of those that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, it meant a lot, and it made a massive difference for me. And if you guys look at Greg's work, you look at my work, and I'm hoping that my work is starting to diverge a little bit from his.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. But
yeah, you have a massive influence for me. I think let's try to wrap it up here, but I want to end with one more question. It's not easy to be an artist, a professional artist, making a living. There's ups and downs, there's all arounds. If you could go back in time, and I know some people would say, like, I wouldn't even go and say anything because, like, the journey's been worth it. But if you had to go back and give yourself advice that would benefit you in some way, where would you go back to, and what would you tell yourself?
I think, because I saw that question earlier, and I thought, what would I do? I could have been a lot further along, a lot faster, had I been willing to approach my heroes in the art and ask them if I could come spend time with them. And, there's people that would say no. I know Bob Kuhn was very reticent to do any kind of critiques and that sort of thing, but I know Luke Fraser studied with him, but I think of artists that I think probably the best in the country, like George Carlson. I got to know him a little bit at Prima West, and he's a great guy. had I had any kind of gumption or could have stepped out of my comfort zone and just said, hey, can I just come pick your brain, something like that, it would have taken me much farther, much faster. And so I'm not telling everybody come talk to me because I got to get work done, but I do think that that could be helpful because obviously most colleges aren't going to teach artists our stuff. You know, I say Savannah College of Art and Design is a great college because they bring professionals in as the professors and teach them what they know, how to make a living at it. I mean, my daughter had to have resumes done by the end of her college year and stuff. And so it's a good school for that. But other than those rare places, you know, Scottsdale Artist School has a lot of good artists coming, you know, just maybe be a little more forward in asking somebody, what do you think? Where do I need to go?
Yeah, that's valuable.
Giving you time to just watch them paint a little bit, you know, because what I found in teaching workshops is that's often the most helpful to artists were visual. So that's how I teach is I'll paint and explain what I'm doing and why I'm applying this, why I'm mixing this color. And then they ask questions. So I wished I'd done that.
Yeah.
Taking workshops. I never even knew workshops existed. And so I just kind of was on my own learning and struggling.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I look back at times when I've been able to watch other artists work and talk to them about their process. That's been extremely invaluable as far as helping me to move forward and especially to get unstuck.
Yeah.
You know, I think we come into these plateaus where we don't know why we're stopped, but there's kind of we need a breakthrough. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another thing I did one time, and I've only done it once, and I should do it all the time, is there's an artist named Pete Zalusek, and he's a great guy. I love it. And he lives north of Chicago. And so I went out one day and we spent an entire weekend going through art museums in Chicago. And the Art Institute, we spent hours and hours just discussing, you know, just looking at Cezanne and falling in love with Cezanne's work and what we ended up calling the leaded density of his tablecloths and things, you know, just how did he handle that? How did he create dimension using just color and not value? You know, and so just doing that with somebody who is knowledgeable, I think could be really, really helpful.
So to reiterate and kind of quantify what you just said, so learning, going out of your way to approach artists, to be able to either, whether by taking a workshop or going to visit them in their studio, if they're willing, going to visit them, but also looking at the work of old masters and analyzing and breaking down their work.
And not by yourself. You know, go with someone who is equally passionate so that you can discuss it. Because you can be looking and just having a sounding board and you be a sounding board is a lot more educational. But yeah, the whole point being be intentional in terms of getting out of the studio and learning from other people. You know, get over your fear of people. You don't have to do it all the time. Those who are like me, there's some who are not afraid of people, who are not afraid. I have a phobia of just picking up the phone and calling somebody, but make it happen. Just do it and it'll help.
Yeah, that's valuable. Well, honestly, I think that this has been a really great conversation, Greg. And again, I really appreciate you taking your time away from your work and especially when you've got those 5 hours in a day, you know, that.
Well, I don't have much to do before our trip coming up, so I just got to finish the ears on my demo study, my once over, and then I'm going to pack and we'll be good. So this was a good timing.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to see your work, or how do they find it, all that?
Well, if they want to look online, my daughter does my website at Beecham. My son does Instagram and some other things. I think it's Greg Beecham Studio, so they can see them there. Of course, if they ever get to Oklahoma City in the summer, they can go see my paintings at Prima West. There's a gallery I'm with right now in Florida called Native Visions. If they're ever down in Naples, there's some work there, pretty much it.
Right. Well, again, thank you, Greg. And I'll make sure that I reference all the things we've talked about here, especially the Quiller book that you were talking about. And I'll have links to all those things in all of Greg's.
Okay, one more book. I mean, because I learned an awful lot just studying books. I mean, David LaFell's book, but especially Richard Schmid, his original Alla Prima, I got a huge amount out of. And now he's dead now, but he produced a second called Alla Prima 2, which was sort of a revised version. But personally, I like the first one better. It could be because I didn't know any of it then when I studied, and now I kind of do because I've just immersed myself in it. But awful lot of good stuff in there. You know, who knows the idea of every arc should be a series of angles to make it more artistic, you know, and that was revolutionary. I mean, so you apply it to your knowledge base, and then, you know, all of a sudden you've got this horse's rear end that you're painting, and you recognize if I just make that a little more angular instead of the big old wide loop, it's a whole lot cooler looking. You know, those kind of things you can pick up from books like that. So Schmid's Alla Prima and Quiller's Color Choices are the two I'd highly recommend.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. That's extremely valuable. Hey, thanks again for your time, and
you bet.
We really appreciate it. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the Business of Art podcast. Every week we will be interviewing new artists and hearing their wonderful and incredible insights from their journeys. And if this is valuable to you, I hope that you'll subscribe and share it with your other artist friends. We'll see you in the next episode.